G'day, fans, and welcome back to another exciting episode of DNA Reviews. It is episode 10 of Andor. I can't believe we're doing 10 weeks straight. It's actually 9 weeks because episode 1 and 2 were joined together. And we're still here. We're still going, Mr. Aaron. What's the deal with that?
Who would have thought when we saw that first week, the amazing journey that we would have been on, and 10 weeks later, we're still hanging on every episode and what's happening, and it's still getting better and better. It's been a good week.
Yeah, it's just unbelievable. Yeah, so exactly 9 weeks we've been at this, and we've still got another 2 more to go. So after this episode, which happens to be, for those who haven't picked up on it, episode 10, which is obviously called One Way Out. So we've got 2 more episodes to go. So we're almost at the end of the first season, which is particularly cool. And of course, ironically, after last week where it was boiling hot, now it's raining outside. It's like the weather on a Narkina 5. It is completely unpredictable, Mr. Aaron. How good's that?
Exactly. That's a really nerdy way to describe the weather, but totally appropriate for this show.
Exactly right. All right, as always, there's a lot to cover off, so let us get straight into it. So, yes, we are talking about episode 10, One Way Out. I did pick that picture of Kino for this particular reason, because it's a very symbolic moment of his life. And, of course, as always, there will be spoilers. So, what do you reckon, Mr. Aaron? Just very, very quickly.
Well, I think it's the moment of his life where he decided he was going to become Snoke.
A lot of people have said that, actually.
it was a good episode. I did enjoy it, and I do think the episodes with Andy Serkis in have been highlights, and he's one of the reasons, because he is a very good actor.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. The casting and the acting in this series has been outstanding, and it continues to be that way. All right, so we're going to kick it all off. Most of the time, I'm actually following this in the order of the series. There's only a couple of bits that I've sort of jig-jagged around, but mucked around with. First thing, the very first shot that appeared, I remember last week we saw Dedra comes up and does a cracking in the neck. I go, oh, yeah, righto. The very first shot of this, we see poor old Olaf, who's now a dead dude, and they've stick him in the bag. And I thought the first thing is, oh, my God, we got zippers in the galaxy far, far away. It's a good old-fashioned body bag. I thought, how good's that? Now, we have seen zippers prior, because if you remember the pseudo-sex scene with Bix a few episodes ago, she zips up her pants. But I thought, there you go, proper zippers up close and personal, Mr. Aaron. I can't recall. That'd be the ultimate trivia question. When's the last time, other than Bix, did you see zippers in the Star Wars universe? And honestly, I just can't think of anything off the top of my head. What do you reckon?
It was on Hoth with the Tauntaun. Its stomach just zipped up. Out came the guts.
So Han's too busy with a lightsaber trying to cut the guts open, and then Luke's just go, no, just unzip it.
No, I don't think they're. I have to say, you pay more attention to me. It wasn't something I said, oh my goodness, they've shown zippers in Star Wars. But you're absolutely right. It's a rare occasion.
Yeah, well, that's a funny thing, because it's real world technology, right? And it's kind of funny because the very next shot is like saying we see a lot of like old school technology in the galaxy far, far away, but now we get to see groovy stuff like hover stretchers, which of course is similar to what you see in Cloud City with Boba Fett pushing Han Solo. So I thought that was kind of cool. So in one moment we got zippers, which are obviously in our world, and the next moment we're seeing hover stretchers, which aren't in our world. And I thought, I don't know, I see these things and I go, oh yeah, that's pretty groovy.
It's interesting. The whole aesthetic of the prison reminds me of Cloud City crossed with THX.
Yeah. Well, exactly right. And we get to see a lot more of the prison. The whole white thing, as we've discussed, is very reminiscent of THX 1138. And not a lot of people have seen that movie. And as we've said before, everything is white. All the walls are white. The characters all wear white. The only difference is they're all bald in THX 1138, whereas here they're not. And of course, they're all males as well. So in the show. So this continues on directly from last week's episode where Olaf passed away. Kino and Cassian have learned about what happened on level 2. And what happens next. And, of course, as we see here, and this is interesting because there's a lot of character development going on here between the two characters. Cassian knows that the escape has got to happen tomorrow when they bring in the replacement guy, right? Yeah. And, of course, poor old Kino, he's not really keen on doing anything. He's had this mindset for all these years, or assume it's years, that he's just got to get through his 200 and something days and he's going to get released. And that would be a lot to process in a very short period of time, to say that, oh, my God, if I just go through the motions, I'm in charge of my level, the guys are doing their thing, and then suddenly it's all just gone to shit. And of course, he now realizes what's going on. If Kino hadn't heard from the doctor what had occurred on level 2, he probably wouldn't have believed it, but he did hear about it. And you've got to think from his perspective, that's a lot to process. So I thought it was really well handled.
Yeah, I did as well. And you can see the process of a man who had a plan, it's changed, and now he doesn't actually know what he's doing. So he's just playing it as he goes, which I do think is a very interesting choice for the character, but also great. As I said, Andy Serkis is a great actor because you could actually see that in the way he was playing the character. So I did think it was another really good character piece with this character with Kino.
Yeah, and of course, from Cassian's point of view, is like he's just been trying to get out since day one, effectively, whereas Kino's just gotten into the routine of just going through the motions. Tracy's mentioned she liked how pristine the prison looked at the start, but as things unfold, you start to see wear and tear. Well, that's exactly right. And of course, what happens in our prison, we don't know what happens in the other prisons around the area, but it sort of unfolds as we go along. And there's a lot to take out of this. It's really, really good. We do discover, there's a lot of things we discover from this episode, that the prison has 5,000 inmates. I was like, mate, that is a lot of dudes. So you would assume from the prison officers, there's maybe less than 100 of them. So 5,000 inmates is a lot of people to be stuck on all those levels. So
do you know what
I thought that was it? Huh?
Do you know what I loved about this prison? It avoided the sci-fi prison cliche of when you go to a sci-fi prison, they do it on like Rua Pente, they do it in Guardians of the Galaxy. It's like a grimy dive, and it's all these really weird aliens. And I really like that this went, no, the Empire is ordered, and they obviously segregate races, and this is where the humanoids go, and it's all clean, and it's all just that sort of prison for humans. And you know, you have seen many of these movies where they have alien prisons, and this was refreshing that it was different and had electrified floors. It felt like it was really well thought out of being part of the whole, the whole prison society, but not gone down something we've seen before as well.
Yeah, and the way the prisoners are treated and how they sort of react with their environment, because it's completely isolated from everybody. All they do is they work and then they sleep and they work and they sleep. And it's always the same group of people. They never mix with anybody else. And you would almost come to think of your group, that room, and with Kino as being like, this is the family that I've got. And you don't have any idea what's going on elsewhere, aside from seeing people in the tunnels through the windows. You go, well, this is the lifestyle I've got now, and I just accept it. And I think because they're in the work mode that they've got to build all the parts on a regular basis, they just get into that process and they just don't switch off out of it. So I thought that was interesting. So Tracy made a point about saying how the prison starts to change, and Chrissy's mentioned here about how the cracks are showing both structural and emotional, and that's exactly right. And in fact, that actually comes up here. So if you look at Paul Kino here, and as I said a moment ago, he's had to process. Remember, this is occurring within the space of a day. So Olaf has died. Cassian has said, mate, tomorrow they're going to bring in the replacement. It's got to happen. So there's no time to sit and think about it, plan about it. It's the complete polar opposite to what happened at Aldani, which they had 3 months to plan for it. This is all occurring in the space of less than 24 hours. And he has to sort of deal with the fact that, okay, this has to occur. We have to go through this breakout, even though he was content to sit and wait it out. And I thought, from his perspective, that is a lot to sort of handle. And, of course, he feels responsible for all the guys under his command. And, of course, once they get back to the bases, back to their sleeping quarters, and they're all asking what's going on, oh, that's tough. That's actually really, really difficult if you were in that position to say, well, this is what's got to occur. It was a really good moment.
Again, I loved it because he has to do, this is rumor control, and he decides just to tell them. It's like, it's true, and this is what's happening. And this is, again, what I was saying about Andy Serkis being a good actor. The whole demeanor of the character changes, and he's not confident anymore. He's more fidgety, and he's not on point as he was. And it's one of those things where you can't imagine someone like Matt LeBlanc being dropped in and him being able to perform. It is one of those characters. This whole series, I think, has really done credit to the casting directors with who they've chosen for these characters.
Yep, I totally agree with you. So we finally learned, because we didn't realize what the counter was originally, and it's the countdown clock of their incarceration. And as you can see there, he's down to the 3 digits at least. He's 216 days. And he's been saying this for all these episodes, going, I've only got 200-something days left. Poor Olaf only had 40, if I recall, and he didn't make it. And that would be a moment to say, well, that 216, it's just not going to happen. He's aware that they're trapped there and they're not going anywhere. And that's a lot to take in. Then, ironically, he goes to bed, wakes up the next morning, and it's a completely different sort of mindset, which we will see in a sec. So what we're going to do is we're going to jump right over to Kurosawa and the ISB meeting. Now, if you remember from last week, right, the Spell House thing, the Anto Krieger ship is going to land with a dead pilot on board. Mate, it's going to expose everything that's going on. And, of course, the plan is coming together. The ship has been intercepted. The dead body has been found. And then absolutely nowhere, suddenly Lonnie sticks his beak in, right? And he goes, and I thought, hang on, is this a play for power? Because, you remember how, I'll say Lonnie's the guy on the right-hand side. Partagaz was kicking the shit out of all of his officers a few episodes ago because they're all practically incompetent and always doing the wrong thing, even when they did the right thing. And I thought, is this Lonnie's way of saying, oh, I have an idea. This is my way to get back into the good books with Partagaz, even though, as we know, it's Dedra's plan, right? So this is how I interpreted what was happening here. He's like, oh, here's a chance for me to say how cool I am. And, of course, Partagaz goes with it. But, of course, Dedra's not exactly the happiest camper in the world over the whole thing. And she can go, oi, what are you doing, mate? This is my thing here. What's the deal with that? And Partagaz, who's in the zone, goes with it. He goes, yep, Lonnie's idea is awesome. Go and inspect the ship with the dead dude on board because that's what they would normally do. And then, of course, Dedra leaves the room. And we don't see her after that. I suspect in the next episode, she's going to walk into where she is, her adjutant, Herta, I think it is, and go off the nut.
So this was a bit of a Dedra light episode, and I think the next couple of episodes we'll see more of her. Her and the other guy are both the same ranking, so neither of them outrank each other. But I did think what he was saying was true. If we didn't do what the Imperial procedure usually is, it will alert the rebels that something's up. And I thought that was pretty amazing that they're actually, one of the things I hate about shows or movies is stupid people doing stupid things. And I go, okay, that's okay for the movie, but people wouldn't really do that in real life. In this, it is really like the characters are thinking what they would do and going with the most appropriate set of decisions for the situation they're in. And that's why I really appreciate this series.
Well, you see, it's interesting because at that point when Lonnie sticks his nose in and said, well, this is what we'd normally do. Let's go ahead and do it. And Partagaz has just got like lights in his eyes going, oh, this is awesome. And says, yep, let's just go ahead and do that. Of course, we don't know what Lonnie's motivations are until later on. So at this point, I looked at it and thought, oh, you sneaky shit. Instead of turning to Dedra over there saying, what do you reckon we do that? He's just gone straight to the big boy. And she said, hey, this is my plan. Stick your freaking nose out of it, you bloody moustache turtle. So he's right in time for November too, by the way. I just realized that. And I thought that was very clever because you are right. They would all be fighting amongst themselves, as we saw with Blevin a few episodes ago, right between Blevin and Dedra. Power fights are going on everywhere to get favor with the boss. And Dedra is clearly the in person at the moment, the in girl. And poor old Lonnie, that's how I interpreted it at the time, that Lonnie wants a piece of that. And I do agree with you. It is part of their process. So, yes, you do wonder where it's going to lead. But it was a good moment. It really, really was. And that's all we see of that sequence. We don't go back to the ISB again for the rest of the episode. So we're back to Narkina 5. The breakout's coming. I love this, right? The countdown of the clock drops by 1 day. And I thought, imagine that. So you've been incarcerated. You look at I've got 2,155 days. Oh, dude. No wonder. You'd probably off yourself if you saw that, wouldn't you? It's like no way in the world would you be able to imagine just count down day by day.
Yeah, can you imagine if one day you're getting halfway through the countdown and that weird computer voice comes over and it says, "Attention, the Empire has just changed the rules of people being incarcerated. Take a look at your new sentence," and it just winds up because the Empire have said everyone's in there for 4 times as much as they were originally sentenced for. It'd be a pretty depressing place to stay,
Or they put in brand new clocks with 5 digits, and you go, "Oh." 11,615 days, unbelievable. Tracy said she wants to go back and rewatch every episode, take a look at what Lonnie says and does. I think you'll find they intentionally don't indicate anything. In previous episodes, a few of the guys have said, well, I got doing reports of this and doing reports of that, and Partagaz sort of kicked them in the head a fair bit. But I think you'll find there's like no indication at all up until this point. Even at this point, it's not really indicating anything that he's doing anything shifty. So it's probably intentionally. So there's no drip feeding along the way, because later on when we see Lonnie doing his thing, you go, well, that just came out of left field. Sticking back with the whole thing on Narkina 5. So he literally did sleep on it, right? So good old Kino comes out and says, all right, we're going to go, right? Now, the interesting thing, out of the 5,000 people in the prison, only his people know what's going to happen. Everybody else is completely oblivious to it. And I thought that was really interesting. So they can't even use the Bush telegraph in the prison to tell everybody there's going to be a mass breakout at exactly the same time. They're just going. He doesn't even tell the night shift guys. They say, no, don't even bother telling them. They'll find out soon enough. And I thought that is interesting. So they're already, in the space of less than 1 day, worked out a breakout, which everybody else in the whole place are going to be going, well, where did that come from? That would be a massive shock to the system.
But the good thing about that is it wasn't in the space of 1 day. Andor has been working on that from the very first day that he got there, and we've seen what he was doing. So when something like this happened, he can go, this is what we're doing, this was what we need to do. So it does show really good character development as they've gone along.
Yeah, so you are right. From Cassian's point of view, he has been. Kino, definitely not.
No.
Right? He's been playing the no, we'll play the good guys, stay on program, all this sort of thing. So he's had to readjust his thinking in the space of a day. Sorry, that's where I was coming from. You are right. Cassian and the other guys have been sort of thinking about it since the beginning. So that was interesting. So we jump over to Ferrix for a little bit, which is interesting because one person we haven't seen for a while is good old Cinta. Okay.
Yeah.
And yet she's still there, still watching Marva, who's getting sicker and sicker. So I'd be curious to see whether Marva reappears or not. And of course, in the next shot, you see this dude who you can assume is working for the ISB. He also is keeping an eye on Marva, right? So Cinta's watching Marva. This dude's watching Marva. And I don't know if you even picked up on this, but she actually walks right through the frame of where this guy's looking. Did you notice that?
Yeah, I did. That was on purpose as well. So I did think, you know, it is signposted that she's being monitored by multiple people.
But do you reckon neither of them know about each other? So Cinta wouldn't know about this dude, and this dude wouldn't know about Cinta. So one's standing in one alcove, the other one's standing in another alcove. They're both looking at the same place, which is kind of funny because clearly Marva's not going anywhere. And then you think if you're holding up, like reading a newspaper, and you look across and go, that chick's been there every day for the past few weeks, and she's sitting there going, that dude's been there every day for the past few weeks. Yeah, you're right. You wonder if they're going to cross paths somewhere and go, all right, why are you here? But because I had to think, who was this guy? I go, he must be the ISB dude that they said was watching over Marva. So,
yeah,
yes. Chrissy said, I like how they use a numerical font that we can understand. Yeah, Aurebesh uses different characters, but the numbering is still the same, even though they do tend to take gaps out of it. But yes, at least the numbers are identical. Aurebesh by itself, though, you can't read unless you have a translator. So that's interesting. So Ferrix, that was one little bit done. Okay, out of the way. I think some people wanted to see what was happening with Cinta. She's still there undercover, waiting. Oh, we'll be waiting there forever at this rate for Cassian to turn up because she's still got to try and knock him off. Then we jump over to Coruscant, and there's a lot that goes on over here. All right, to deal with poor Mon Mothma and her sagas. It's interesting. Some people have been critical of the fact that this Mon Mothma story has been going for so long. But I don't know about you. I find it very intriguing that she's got her financial problems. How is she going to fix it? She's going all these different directions with no luck. And, of course, she ends up bringing in the fact that we've got Davo. I'll call him Davo. It's probably pronounced Davo, but I'll go with Davo. Did you notice this? She says that the apartment is state property where she lives.
Yes.
So they can't make a lot of changes to it. And I was wondering if that is something that's an Empire directive or that's been in place since the New Republic or since the Old Republic. I don't know the answer, but do you have a thought on it?
I probably thought, I don't know if it's since the Empire, but I probably thought because she's a politician and she's, it's like an embassy, maybe, you know, she's not from Coruscant, but all the different planets come there. So obviously, I don't know, but I wouldn't think they live there all the time. They do their turn in the Senate and then they return to their home planet. So I would have thought, yeah, the embassy owns that. And maybe the Empire has just annexed all of that and said, well, it's all state property. But I don't know.
Yeah, but an embassy is usually the property is owned by the government. So if they want to sort of put pictures on the walls and spray paint bloody murals and shit, they can just knock themselves out. I thought it was an interesting comment. So it's the apartment is owned by the state. So we're assuming obviously to be the Empire. I mean, clearly Mothma's been involved with the Senate for a very, very long time, especially since she said 16 or 17 or something like that. So. For a very long time, and it's almost like this is their home of life. And I thought, well, it was just an interesting comment. And I thought, well, I wonder if the Empire said no more changes to the place as to why is anybody's guess. But as Davo says, it's pretty old and boring. So, but either way, yes, if you want to hang up pictures on the wall of your latest, I'll try and get it right, Chandrila, not Chandrila, Chandrila. Got to get used to that. Chandrilian sort of football team. Clearly, that's not going to happen. So, Davo.
So I did, when you're talking about that, I guess this is more to do with the whole political thing. You had her starting when she was very young in politics. You also saw that with Padme. And I think, well, that's really unusual. But I was watching the latest episode of The Crown. And the Queen said, I went to Eton, when I was little, and they started me not with normal classes. It was with politics and history and things like that. So I guess when people are going into politics, even in the real world, there is this sort of very young career path of going that way. And I did think that was interesting because I always thought that was strange with Padme. But seeing this episode of The Crown where Queen Elizabeth says, yes, I didn't get to do art and play sports. They had me reading history books and studying stuff like that. I mean, it is a precedent that we have here as well.
Yeah, they've got a future direction, and they've got to stick with their future direction. So Mon has met with Davo. I'm going to stick with Davo because it just sounds such a good name. Because
He
clearly
is
a dodgy
Australian as
dude.
well, isn't he?
Huh?
He is Australian, isn't he?
I've got no idea, actually. But anyway, let's assume I don't know. So good old Davo, right? He is clearly one cool cat, right? And he knows exactly what he wants because clearly he's a bit of a shifty dude. And I thought this dude was awesome, right? They're all talking in riddles about what it is that each of them wants. Okay, but clearly Mon needs some money, and Davo is the one who can get it for her. So I like the fact that he's already spoken to Perrin several times. And at this point, we don't exactly know what it is that he wants, right? But I get the feeling that Perrin approved what Davo said, because as we had mentioned prior, that Perrin is a bit of a easygoing kind of no-nonsense sort of dude who likes his lifestyle and probably doesn't want it to change. And of course, at this point, we still don't know what it is that they're going to bring up. Now, they show a wide shot of the entire room. And I noticed, I don't know if you picked up, there's no traffic outside. Up here, there's nothing, not a single thing. Now, whether that's a visual effects budget thing or whether it's just a day where no one's driving around.
I think I mentioned this before, that when we saw Coruscant in the prequels, it was a bustling hub of the center, and wherever the Empire goes, they lock everything right down. You can bet the Empire has said, we've got no fly zones around politicians because we're, terrorists and ram us and stuff like that. It would be a locked down military society now. And I think that's why there isn't A, the amount of aliens and stuff walking around, and B, the traffic and everything. It's just totally locked down.
Well, it's funny you mentioned the aliens because they do actually pop up later on, which is really, really interesting. So the thing with Davo, right, you can relate, think of all these sorts of real life, ultra rich business people, mainly businessmen, I guess, more than women, who just have everything that they want, right? And good old Davo, and he's a shifty dude from the beginning. What's his fee going to be, right? He's not interested in money. He's got more money than he knows what to do with. He's like, well, what do you want then, dude? And, of course, the penny drops. Lita, we now know, is nearly 14, so she's 13 currently. Davo's kid is 14, and we all know about the Chandrilla custom, which is what DJ says here. They're betrothed from a young age. Yeah. And it was like, I did not see that coming, dude.
No,
what about you?
I loved how this whole thing played out, where she's going, oh, I need to pay you because I'm not going to be in someone like you's debt. And he's going, oh, I don't need money. And I'm like, oh, this is going to be bad. But I did not see that coming.
And because when we, like all those episodes ago when Mon said, oh, yeah, it's part of the Chandrilla custom to get married at a young age. And because you never thought anything about it. And we'd asked what the deals was with Lita, right? Now, of course, it's come out, right? So she's like getting towards age of being 15, which is the betrothing age. And Davo's got his son. So you can clearly see what he wants to do. He wants to marry into the Mothma family, right? Which, of course, gives him a much more credible name. And, of course, the worst part is I reckon that Lita would say yes to it because she wants to stay wealthy. And clearly Davo, and, of course, by extension, his kid, would have a shitload of money to chuck around. And we know that Lita is used to a very, very luxurious lifestyle. And she's not the happiest camper in the world dealing with Mon, her mother. So I reckon, given the opportunity, Lita would say, I'm in.
Well, it all depends whether you see the son and he rocks up and he looks like Chris Hemsworth or Quasimodo, because I think that Lita is probably someone who's very materialistic and into image and stuff like that as well.
I think image has got nothing to do with it. It's purely like, you know what, dude, put a bag on your head, we'll get married. I just want the money, right? And you can pretend I'll be your arm at the ambassadorial dinners and all the rest of it, but afterwards you go left, I go right, but we're still classed as being married, much like Mon and Perrin are to a large degree. Yeah. So, yeah, Tracy's right. Now we know why the daughter was highlighted. I mean, we never saw this coming episodes ago, which is absolutely fantastic. It's all come to this fruition now. And what I love the fact is, you look at poor Mon, she is absolutely crapping herself at this point, right? She's desperate for the money. Clearly, she's not going to get it from Davo. And we now know that Davo spoke to Perrin, and you can bet your bottom dollar Perrin would have said to Davo's request, yep, she's all yours, dude. Bring the son over and let's hook him up.
Well, the trouble with the situation that Mon she's got herself into is she's confided with them the issues she has.
Yeah.
So they know if she doesn't go with that, she's still got those issues. And that can almost be used as a blackmail thing with her. The other thing that we've been set up in the other issues is the daughter is a bit of a daddy's girl. And he obviously really adores his daughter too. And he hasn't been part of this whole decision. So could hit the fan when he finds out what's going on in the background. And when it finds out, because he will, that it's to do with money, there's going to be all kinds of issues. She's digging a hole for herself that I don't know how she's going to get out of.
Yeah, backed against the corner badly. So you are right. Parents obviously spoken to Lita. Actually, no, he hasn't spoken. He's spoken to Davo. Davo said, well, this is what I'm thinking of doing. What do you reckon? Parents have gone, mate, awesome, go for it, because clearly it benefits him, right?
Yeah.
Lita, if he says to Lita, which he clearly hasn't happened at this point, says, you know what, you're going to get hooked up with this dude you may or may not like, but hey, there's been a lot of money involved with it. You get awesome, get away from Mon.
Yeah.
Mate, the world is fantastic. And you are right. Davo knows what Mon is up to. She needs money for something and can't go through the normal channels. Oh, yay.
The other thing, and again, this is every episode has done this. There's always been lines or exchanges that I go, this is a cut above what you usually see in Star Wars. And when she's walking off and he says, that's the first lie you've told, I was like, this is really good. This is really good writing for this series.
Yeah, and Mon's reaction to the oh, geez, it's like, and you really felt for you, oh, you poor dear. I like this one from Christy. Mon looks like a mother who hasn't grasped that her baby is old enough. Well, yeah, and clearly in Chandrillian customs, yeah, she is, and because Mon and Lita don't really get along, if anything, Lita would probably say, "Yep, I'll marry the dude just to spite my mother because my mother's a pain in the ass." Oh,
yeah,
not good. And yes. Absolutely love it. All right, so we're still sticking with. So we left Mon there. We don't get back to her again, and she's like, "Yeah, not good." And there's even a sequence where everybody's walking in the room. She's still sitting there by herself. So she's always on her own. Remember last week we saw her from behind. She's on her own. In this episode, she's always. Oh, you got to feel for her. You really do. So we end up.
Do you know what she's thinking? I wish I could find some Bothams to throw under the bus here.
Where's a Botham when you need one? So we hand over to the good old Galactic Antiquities and Objects of Interest store, aka Aaron's Collectibles in the galaxy far, far away. First things first, right? He's polishing, or he's doing something with the headpiece. Do you recognize it at all?
I didn't. I knew it was from something because it was obviously a hero prop, but I'm not sure.
I like it. It's from something as opposed to from nothing. So it's Padme's headpiece from Attack of the Clones. So how we got that is anybody's guess, but I thought that was kind of groovy. So yes, what do you call it? The Easter egg hunters went completely tropo over that. Like, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. So Claire's walked in and said, "Oh, the chalk marks on the ground isn't where they're meant to be." Right now, I don't know if you picked up on this. So Luthen said he's going to meet somebody. We don't know who that is at this point. This was all one take. Did you notice this? It was all one Steadicam shot.
I did. I really appreciate when they do stuff like that. And it is hard to do because obviously on this, it's a long take all the way through. And they must have stitched different sets together because it obviously wasn't all built as big as it is. So I was really impressed by the take.
Yeah. So it's just allows for the camera to move through the room with these guys as these two are moving through it. And of course, you're just dialing into the conversation. So poor old Luthen's got to go and meet somebody. It's been a year since he's heard from them. Doesn't know who it is. Claire doesn't want him to go. And as Luthen says, if it's a trap, he's screwed anyway. So, yeah, that was like, oh, okay, that's sort of come out of absolute nowhere, which was particularly groovy. And of course, Luthen pops up again later on. And it's like, oh, in the way we never expected. All right, so we go back to Nakina 5 now. I've stuck all these shots together, right? Okay, so first things first. Hands are shaking, and you would, if you put yourself in the position of these guys, be shitting yourself big time because it's about to all go down. And I had to really feel for him because the dude on the left we're not seeing his face, we're just seeing his hands. You would be right because this has all just come up out of nowhere, out of absolute nowhere. And of course, the new guy turns up. So this is why they've got to do the breakout now because the new guy, they're going to bring the elevator down, and they're going to try and make their breakout. And I thought, I don't know if you noticed the fate of this dude, but yeah, it didn't end well. But look at the poor bastard. He's absolutely cracked himself. I was like, oh, rough.
Well, I guess it plays out, and we'll talk about it more, but the guards themselves weren't a bunch of old guys either that had lived long lives. All of them, I don't think it'd be a great life living on the prison, but I guess they get to go home after, ever how long. But when it all starts going down, no one is confident on either side of what exactly is happening or what even the process should be. I didn't think.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. So remember last episode, Cassian was sawing through in the dunny the pipe, and we had no idea what was going on, right? And it turns out it's a water pipe, right?
Yeah.
Now, did you guess why he was trying to break a water pipe? Because I certainly didn't.
No, I didn't either. And it's really genius because it's been set up, it's been highlighted in a couple of episodes, and it's the logical thing to do. And that's why I like the writing of this show. They have surprises, and the surprises actually make sense.
Yeah, because when the water's coming, I go, "What are you trying? What are you trying to do, dude? I don't get it." So I watched this last Wednesday, and of course I watched it again today to get these pictures. And I tell you what, even a second time, the tension was still there, right? It was really intense because I thought, what is going to happen? And the series has proven to be something that is not predictable. You don't know
Yeah.
how it's going to work. It's like, how are these guys going to get out of here? Clearly, they're waiting for the new guy to turn up. What's the next bet, right? And of course, none of us knew what was happening. And of course, it's the old staging of the fight between inmates. I thought,
Yeah.
oh, okay, I didn't see that one coming. So you push me, I push you. There's a bit of a kerfuffle with the group, and off she goes. And I think my next shot is when they start throwing projectiles at the guards, which of course you have to do something like that because you've got no weapons. And yeah, I thought it was a really interesting way of sort of starting it off.
It was interesting because if I was a prison guard and then a scuffle started between inmates, I would instantly think, oh, there's something up, because they do this in so many movies that it's always covering from something up. I wish in a couple of previous episodes they had shown some inmate tension before, and guards sort of going, pipe down or we're going to put the floors on, to show that this kind of thing was more of a something that happened, that the guards wouldn't go, hey, hang on, there's something unusual about this. That was the only criticism I would have. Apart from that, I thought it was, like you said, the tension starts at the start of the scene and it keeps ratcheting up and ratcheting up and ratcheting up until all hell breaks loose.
Yeah, the thing is, like, because there's such a routine that continues on a regular basis, and you don't know if there's tension on other levels. I mean, there would be prisoners who don't get along with other prisoners, right? And then there may be a little bit goes on here, there, and everywhere. But of course, in the trope of the typical show, when the prisoners are fighting amongst each other, all the guards rush in to break them up, right? And as Tracy said, it's a classic diversion move, right? But the guards don't. They stay up on their balcony. Right, and you go, oh, okay, that part clearly didn't work, and they all rush in. Okay, separate, and then of course they get jumped on. That doesn't occur here, right? And I thought, okay, so you're right. It's a diversion. It's a way of getting the guards' attention. Go, oi, 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 but they're not going to do anything. If anything, they'll press the button and just electrify the floor. So I thought that was really interesting. So what happens eventually is when they do go to electrify the floor, the water shorts everything out. But of course, there's a few casualties in the interim, and of course, the guys all jump on the table, and just like that, all the lights go out. And I thought at this moment for poor old Keno and the troops, there is no turning back now. And after that, it was all on for young and old. There was a lot of really, really good imagery that came from this entire sequence. I only had to pick a few pictures, but you can stitch the whole thing together and you go, how do we do it? They had to get on that elevator and had to disable the electrical floor, and they did both in one go. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I thought the whole process was filmed really well. Probably the slowest elevator or moving platform in Star Wars history, though. I did really like, as you said, they just started piffing whatever they could at the guards. And it wasn't your typical movie trope where the guards are shooting and don't hit anyone and all the rebels like get them middle of the forehead and knock them out. No, they were missing and it was going all over the place, and prisoners are getting shot left, right, and center. I thought this is a really, again, very realistic for the Star Wars universe, not one that kids would probably enjoy because there was too much death of the good guys kind of thing.
Well, it's interesting because the focal point of the story, not the story, of this sequence, not even the sequence, of the thing is our guys around our table, right? What happens to them? And of course, we lose one of our guys from the table. And you are right, dudes are dropping everywhere. And it's like, oh, that's just, you don't know who's going to make it, who's not going to make it. And it is sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? It builds up all this tension. I didn't want to use the word tension, but it is tension. And because you're right, you don't know what's going to happen and how it's going to work. And projectiles being chucked at the guards is only going to go so far. And if DJ said it's not the best hour of Star Wars this year, the best hour of anything this year. So clearly he absolutely liked it. And even Christy said, time to step back and watch the sidelines. And it was interesting to say, okay, we've got to try. This is our way out. How is it going to work? We're already losing guys, and you're thinking, mate, we could lose half the room before we actually get the escape happening. But it is working for the greater good of the bigger collective rather
Yeah.
than just who's in this room at the time. And there are going to be casualties, and not everybody's going to make it. I like the fact, because of the water pipe breaking upstairs, the roof is now leaking. Imagine it from this guy's perspective. Go, what the friggin' else is
Well, this is one of the really great things I liked about this episode, how when it was happening, none of the other teams, none of the other levels knew what was happening. And it's that sort of very slow burn, slow build up where they're working and they see a couple of blasters through a window or something like that. And it slowly builds and builds and builds. The one thing, though, you've got to remember, once this happened on this station, if you're a prisoner there, you have to get out because everyone is going to be killed. Anyone who's left after this is going to be killed. So once it starts happening, you can understand why it sort of spreads from team to team and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And I thought that was a really great way to build up the release of the tension and then the action of the episode. And what happens, it switches the dynamics for the prisoners, prison guards having total control to realizing they're totally outnumbered and they're screwed. And you've got all these guards that have been bullies the whole time and frying people, now cowering and hiding in cupboards and stuff, which is a great flip over of the themes.
Yeah, right. And of course, you will find are there prisoners who just did not want to participate no matter what, but they're forced to. I mean, clearly they are aware of what's happened, but you would have to have some people who say, you know what, I'm not that way inclined. My job, I got put in prison for pickpocketing. Violence isn't my thing, right? And suddenly there's violence going on everywhere. Yeah, it would certainly weed out those who were clearly going to make it and those who weren't. And with that in mind, like Cassian's combat and killing experience clearly comes in handy. And I thought that was really interesting because he clearly takes charge with Kino and they go off to try and find the control room accordingly. Now, of course, as you said, in a prison designed where no one can break out, when things go wrong, there's confusion everywhere. And that would be the interesting. So now we're seeing it from these guys' perspective. They're saying something's happening. We don't know what it is. And of course, whoever's at the other end of the control, the microphone is saying, well, go down there and sort it out. And you're thinking, for all we know, the thing's been running harmoniously could be for years, up until the level 2 incident, right, where they had to electrocute everybody. And after going through this entire process day in and day out for such a long period of time, to have something go completely a little bit left field, it would throw you completely off. So,
I did think they have never had a drill. They all look, to me, young and wet behind the ears, and no one seemed to know. And they're sort of, even when there's firing and fighting and they don't know what's going on, they're going, oh, just go down and switch it back on and stuff. And you're like, oh, they have no idea what they're just about to get themselves into.
So DJ said it's not subject. It's in this text. The episode's theme is about sacrificing the innocent to achieve an objective and how far you're willing to go. That's exactly true, and that happens in a few extra areas throughout the series as well. No one can break out. It's like calling a ship. No one can break out is like calling the ship unsinkable. But it took someone like Cassian and the rest of the guys, or a couple of the guys, to really think about that. And of course, they needed the thing of Olaf dying. All right. And now, if the whole scenario with level 2 had never happened, right, this entire breakout would never have occurred. Now, clearly, Cassian had been trying to cut through the pipe from last week's episode. And had that worked and he shorted the floor out, it probably would have been a massive inconvenience. But still, being able to physically break out wouldn't have worked because the rest of the room wasn't in on it. And Kino certainly wasn't in on it. Now, Kino had a reason to join forces with Cassian and go, yeah, we kind of need to now. We really have to break out. And that was the driving force. If had Kino said no, half of the room would have said, no, we're following Kino because he's the guy in charge. Whereas, obviously, in this instance, everybody's following Kino and Cassian. Now, I like this, right? As I mentioned, right, not all of the prisoners would be combat trained with weapons, right? But there's possible that some of the guards aren't either. So they may be guarding the prison, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they've had weapons training or have used them before. So it's highly likely that they're not like soldiers, for example. So it's highly likely that some of the guards already said, look, I don't really know how the gun works. I just push people around and I get my electro rod and do whatever.
Yeah.
So,
And we know there's only 12 guards per level. And when there's multiple teams per level of prisoners and there's night and day shift, the guards know instantly that there's a big problem. They're massively outnumbered, and especially when the prisoners start getting guns and the floors aren't working. So, yeah.
Yeah, because remember when we first got to this prison, we looked at it and thought, how the hell would you break out of this thing? I mean, that's pretty tough. And they found a way, and it's kind of cool. Now, first things first, that's a lot of stairs. I don't know where this is, but, mate, I'll tell you what, you're going to get pretty fit walking up that. I just chucked that in because I thought, mate, that is a lot of steps, and we're a long way under the ground.
Yeah.
And, of course, this demonstrates, as I said a moment ago, the guards' lack of combat experience, because clearly they forgot about the old watching your six. And, yes, very good.
Yeah, I thought that too. I did think that shot reminded me of Ghostbusters, when they're all gung ho and then they walk into the hotel and realize they've got to walk to the top to get to the Marshmallow Man kind of thing.
Well, that's right. Now we get into the control room, and who knew? We certainly wouldn't have guessed this. That the big, booming, all-powerful Oz voice was just the wimpy, just the wimpy dude.
Yeah, I thought that was fantastic because I actually thought it was going to be more like an old fatter guy who was like lording over everyone, but no, it's just like the imperial bureaucracy. They've gone, he's not got a scary voice, let's put it into the voice modulator and make him big and booming.
How about that? And of course, our heroes break in as predicted from what we saw from when we first arrived. The side's power is all hydro, and ironically, one level shuts it all down. I was like, I thought they'd have to all these like turn keys and press buttons, and pretty much one lever pretty much does the job. And I thought,
do you really think they were being honest when they said, "Oh, and once it's shut down, it takes hours to?" Yeah, I wasn't sure. I thought that might be just a bit of a lie, but it was good. You couldn't tell who was lying and who. Some people there are obviously more committed to the Empire than others, because you've got one guy that they're like, "Who can do this?" He's like, "He can do it," kind of thing. No one wants to get shot for this.
Yeah, well, when Cassian puts a gun in his head and is like, "Oh, dude, you need to watch previous episodes of Andor," Cassian will pull the trigger. The voice itself is the voice of God in the credits. Oh, well, there you go. Well, I guess it would be because, as the prisoners are concerned, they wouldn't know where it's coming from, and it is just the voice that appears all over the place. So, yes, but yes, you are right. Once you've turned off the power, that's it. You're done and dusted. And as I said, the backup power kicks in, and they're all good to go. One lever shuts down the tractor beams on the Death Star. Actually, technically, you're right, it does. Although, as a deleted scene, they did actually have there's multiple tractor beam controls. You turn off one and it shuts the whole thing down. But yeah, good point. So, yes. Yeah. But I mean, turning off a tractor beam is different to shutting down the power to your entire site. It's not exactly apples for apples, but I hear you. But they replicate each other. Sorry,
the Imperial designers are too practical. They're like, we make it simple, we make it practical. One button turns it all off.
Yeah, exactly right. I mean, these days we input the command codes and whatever, and you go, I don't know what that is. So, yes, very good. So, on program, right? So the tables have turned, and of course, the important thing to remember is these guys are just operators. They're not guards, right? And I think that's one of the reasons why they get spared, because they are not part of the guarding machine. And I think that's the reason why they're spared. Some people said why, and some fans have said, why didn't Cassian knock them both off? And I thought, well, realistically, aside from the fact they are pretty wimpy, they just push buttons. And for all we know, they don't even see the prisoners, right? They're just at the top making sure everything works. So I thought that was a good little moment, because these guys aren't going to do anything. They can't get the power back on. They're just going to sit back and just let it all happen.
It would have been funny if they'd said something like, what do you mean a prison? We thought we were on an Imperial hydraulic, like some power base or something, and didn't even realize what they were being forced to do.
Well, I guess it's the equivalent of saying if you work in a nuclear power plant, you work in the control room, you never actually physically walk out to where the reactors are or anywhere else. You just walk straight into the room, you press all your buttons, you walk out at the end of the day, right? You got no idea what's going on outside. You've never been out there. You've never had a need to go out there, right? Yeah. And some companies, some factories work that way. People work in the head office. They work in a control room. Manufacturing is like in a different suburb. They never go down there. They don't need to go down there, right? And I've seen this firsthand. So for all we know, you are right. I mean, these guys would know that they're in a prison because the guy goes on program, but they never see any of the prisoners. They probably might not even see the guards. They just come in, do their bit, and then leave. So to have the prisoners suddenly turn up and go, holy shit, I didn't see that coming. Yeah, it's very, very groovy. This was a defining moment for good old Kino, right? He's got to tell all the troops, get out. All the power's been shut down, and they've got to go out and escape, find any route possible, help everybody. And I thought that was good. The interesting thing, of course, is Cassian says, tell him who you are. And because he has to explain who he is, because not everybody would know who Kino is, because he's from a different level. But it was a really good moment of the episode where he explains, all right, we're never going to get released. They killed all these people, right, on level 2, 100 people on level 2. You got to go, guys. And you got to remember, from the perspective of the entire prison, this has just happened out of nowhere. Right? Now, unlike a normal show where there's a bit of a build up for it, it's just like one moment you're putting your bolts onto your big mechanical thing, and all of a sudden, all the power's off, and then all of a sudden the doors are open. Escape, flee, run for your lives.
And you had to take a leap of faith just to step out of the cell onto the floor, just in case it wasn't true. But this is what I was saying about Andy Serkis as a great actor, where he's been playing one role in all the other episodes, where he's a confident leader who's getting everyone through their sentence and making sure he doesn't get in any trouble himself. And his whole demeanor and mood has changed, where he's got to find leadership again, but in a totally different way, because now he is the leader of the prisoners escaping. So again, I think it's very good of him as an actor to go from one mode of being a leader to another, and they are totally different. You could see when he starts the speech that Andor says, you have to do this, he isn't confident, and he builds up his confidence as he gets to the end of the speech till it gets to the one way out and starting a motivational chant to get the prisoners to do it. And I thought that was really clever as well.
So I agree with DJ. Yeah, brilliant moment, masterfully acted. Greg has mentioned, wonder with the water for the hydro is flowing in from the surrounding sea outside the facility, where does it flow to? Natural chasm under this, don't know. I mean, it just does. But when we first saw the Nakina and you had the vortex of the water going underneath, we suspected it was hydro powered, and it was. Ads has said the Empire will take care of them for their failure. Probably not the operating guys, but the guards definitely, if they, especially the guys that we're going to see a bit later on. And Kino repeats what Cassian said to rally the prisoners, just like Jin Urso to rally the rebels. Yes, that's a good point, actually. So maybe Cassian's picking up all these things along the way. And it's a good observation. So, repeat what Cassian said. Yeah, exactly right. I guess motivational speeches are effectively the same no matter what.
Yeah.
Everybody, the world's against us. We've got to go out and it's like fight the good fight for ourselves and for the greater glory of the universe, and away we go. Now, there's always a bit of humor and something serious. This exact shot was it? What it reminds you of a certain Han Solo from the Death Star. It's like you're just waiting for someone to call back and go, Kino, what's your operating number?
I think there's been a lot of shots that have mirrored shots from even other movies and things through the whole series. And I do like little cinematic nods and things like that. They're kind of Easter eggs for people who are more observant of just the way film is made.
Yes, so this is interesting. You're right. I'm fine. How are you? It was a boring conversation anyway. So the message has gone out to everybody. And, of course, our night shift guys who have just woken up from their slumber have just thought, hey, what's going on? And, of course, you got to realize this. The irony of the public order resentencing directive is that the Empire wanted to keep everybody locked up and hidden, especially for minor crimes, right? But now, once these guys all get out, what they're going to do is join the alliance against the Empire, which is going to bolster the rebel numbers overnight. So it's had the exact polar opposite effect from what it was meant to do. So when the Aldani thing occurred, and I think it was Yularen said, no, lock them up. PORD, right? The Empire is going to put the foot down. Dedra was the one who quickly said it's the wrong thing to do. It's going to piss everybody off rather than sort of lock everybody up. And she was right. That's exactly what's going to occur here. And, of course, some of these guys will escape. They'll tell the rest of the world, this is what's going on in the prisons, how we're being treated. And, of course, these guys are all going to just join the alliance. And that's the reason why I think from the Rebel Alliance, which is barely nothing at this point, Luthen, Kalea, a couple of handful of others, is just going to grow significantly to all these systems in the next couple of years, which is why by Rogue One, it's a much bigger organization. And it's all because of things like this.
And this is actually what Luthen said a couple of episodes ago. He said, we've got to make things worse for the people. We've got to make the Empire show their hand and how bad they are. And by doing this, it will make the Empire harder on everyone. And it's done exactly what he said it would do, where by making all the laws tougher and stricter, it's had, like you said, the opposite effect, where instead of locking everyone down, now everyone really does see something to rebel against.
Yeah, and the treatment of what happened on the guys on level 2 just really emphasised that. So it's kind of funny, isn't it? So you have a reaction, have an action, then you react to that, And then, of course, the result of that reaction undoes everything that you were attempting to do in the first place. And then we're seeing it firsthand. We're actually seeing it actually happen on screen right before our eyes, which is really groovy. You are right, Tracy. Cassian is always in the background pushing others, like this whole series, others shine. And you are exactly right. So he's never really willing to take the what do you call it? The credit for himself.
Do you know who he didn't push? He didn't push Kino. He didn't push Kino off into the water at the end.
Well, it's kind of lucky, eh? So yes, very, very good. Chrissy said, "Yeah, Shiny makes you an easy target." Yeah, exactly. Very, very good. And Adza said, "Yeah, locking them was a means to cheap slave labor." Well, yeah, clearly that was part of the plan. As we saw. Now, the rest of the guards, they're all hiding away, as you said earlier. They're outnumbered. And of course, this dude here was the guy who was electrocuting everybody with the staff earlier. So he's got more reason than everybody to just stay hidden. Yeah. And you do wonder what their end fate is going to be. But clearly they've realized, yep, it's a losing battle.
I was really hoping, just as the guards thought they had escaped it all, that the door opened and there's like some huge prisoner who's like, come on out, something like that. Just so
sorry.
Oh, just so it's one of those things where they've built up over the 3 episodes you've been in the prison, how sadistic some of these guards can be and how much they love just giving anyone an electric jolt just for the hell of it. It would have been nice to just see something a bit nasty happening back to them as well.
Yeah, I think you could, but it would be a little bit predictable as well. It's the old comeuppance thing. But maybe some of those guys will get the comeuppance from the Empire, as Ads alluded to earlier, when eventually the Empire rolls up and says, "Oi, what happened here?" It's like, well, it's kind of like this. So, yes, I think that's their time will come. But, yes, to have the people with the power suddenly being completely helpless and just cowering in the corner, it's an interesting sort of way of looking at it, isn't it? I mean, they're just prisoners. And as we said, it's more numbers than necessarily a threat because, as we said, not all of them will be trained. They're just running because everybody else is running. So, yeah, interesting. So they get to the outdoor bit. And, of course, I first thought when they're all running, where are they going to go? And I thought they're going to try and find a ship or this or that, not realizing there's 5,000 of them, right? And of course, they end up on the platform outside. Now, my first thought was they haven't seen daylight in sometimes months, years. That I was surprised that they didn't react to the daylight, right? And it's like, oh my God, the blinding sun. I thought that was a bit of a missed opportunity. And of course, all they're looking at is the water. I was thinking, oh, bloody hell, where are we going to go? Now, the cruelest blow of the entire show is that Kino can't swim. Oh, dude, how did you find that?
Maybe he was from Tatooine or something where you wouldn't need to. But that was, and the best thing about it is they didn't dwell on it. Cassian looks sorry for him and then just gets pushed over in a wave by himself. And the thing is, the story does make a lot of sense because they shut down the hydro thing to stop the power, but it also meant the vortexes underneath the prison weren't there to suck them all away afterwards. So I did think that was a genius way of dealing with 2 birds with 1 stone by doing that.
So freedom is really, really close. And Kino says he can't go because he can't swim. I was like, that just came out of nowhere. And you're right. Cassian said, we'll help you. And you're right. It's just the wave of dudes just push him over the side. And of course, we don't see him after that. What happens now is anybody's guess. And I like that because one of the things that the series has been doing is not showing the fates of certain characters. Like we still don't know what happened to Old Arnie with the commandant's wife and the kid. We still don't know what happened there. We just made assumptions, right? And Kino's fate may never be revealed. And I thought that was really, really good. And it's really sad too because it's like, well, we see what happens afterwards. So we're following effectively Cassian's story, but we don't know what the end result is going to be. And of course, if Kino can't swim, there must be others who can't either. And there'll be the guys going, well, this is all great. I was happy being in my cell. I only had 3 days left, even though I'm never going to get released. This is not what I planned for. So you would have to think that some prisoners have just gone with the ride, not realizing that there's actually no end game, that they're just going to get recaptured and put back in the cell. So I agree with you, Tracy. It was very sad. And yes, after not wanting to escape in the first place, being forced to escape and then realizing he can't actually go the next step, it's tough. So,
yeah. And then you did see it would be better. If I had a choice between drowning or electrocution, I would probably have jumped as well.
Well, that's right. So what it takes is one person to take the leap. And as I didn't realize until I watched it again, there actually is land in the distance, right? And of course, it's freedom. So, and as Cassian said, no matter what happens next, we've at least, or I think Cassian or Keno, someone says, whatever happens next, at least we've got this far, right? And it's like, great. But it just takes one person to take the leap, literally the leap. And of course, it's a long way down. And of course, the thing I discovered is once they all start jumping, right, they're going to be landing on top of each other in the water. So even if you jump off, hit in the water and go, done, I'm good to go, a dude right above you is just going to go, there's going to be a lot of dead bodies in the water by the time you get down there. And because they can't jump too far. And that's a lot of people. And of course, that then leads us to a really great moment where freedom awaits. But I did wonder, it's like, it's the old, there's always a bigger fish. What would happen if they're all swimming away and all of a sudden these shark fins come along and go, gulp, 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 gulp. You do wonder if that happened. They're not going to show up. They didn't show up, but you do wonder if that actually occurred.
If Jar Jar Binks yells goober fish, and then there's always a bigger fish, and the Colo claw fish and all of that. Who knows? I did wonder. I couldn't remember, and I didn't look back when they went to the prison and they were going over the planet and they were playing all that Vangelis music. I don't remember. I thought it was just a water world. I don't remember seeing any land close at all when they were going in. So I was surprised, like you, that there was land in the distance, kind of thing.
Yeah, because when they jumped in the water, I thought, where are they going to go now? And of course, what happens if you're a shit out swimmer and you go, man, I've got to swim like 15 kilometers? Oh, they would have. It's like baby turtles running into the ocean. And when they get there, go, well, what happens now? And they get eaten by all the fish that are swimming past. Oh, all these variables have to occur for the success rate to be good. And you think of the guys who can't swim, the guys who died hitting the water, the guys who died having guys land on top of them, guys who drowned, right? It's like, it would not have been a very, very big number of those who made it. So,
no.
So Keno staying behind, I like it, as I said, he needed to stay behind to identify Andor. Because don't forget, they don't know his name is Andor. They think it's something else. Yes, very, very good. Or he doubles back and flies into the ship and flies off. Yeah, that'd be like that commercial with the geese. They're all flying away, and there's one inside an airplane looking at him and go, hey, how you going, guys? And Tracy was waiting for the fish comment. Well, you would have to think maybe when they built the prison, they deliberately built it in an ocean that actually has very, very nasty wildlife running around in case the unlikely event that a dude escapes. And it's like, don't worry about it. Sharks out there will get them. So with that in mind, some fans believed that because when you see Cassian and Melshi here, some fans believe that many escapees actually survived the escape, even though we're only just seeing two of them here. But from our table, it's just Cassian and Melshi. So all the other guys carked it. And I don't know if you noticed it, but in the background up here, there's actually a ship, something up there looking in the water. I take that to be looking for some of the escapees. So
I did wonder as well, there probably wouldn't have been enough ships to get everyone off, but I did wonder if there wouldn't have been a couple of ships somewhere, escape ships or transports on there somewhere that some of the other prisoners might have got on as well. I guess it isn't important, but I did wonder if you're stuck on an island like that, surely for the guards, there is a boat or hydrofoils or Imperial something to get off just in case there's an emergency.
Well, we got backup power on the station. They didn't mention anything about communications. So you would think that our two wimpy guys are going to communicate to one of the other prisons. So you wouldn't believe what's just happened over here. And of course, they then send out ships looking for people. So if it turns out that of 5,000 people, it's just Cassian and Melshi, the ones who survive. Oh, that's not a very good ratio, is it? So, yes. Oh, good point, Ads. Yeah, right. If there were sharks, they'd get sucked into the vortex unless they're smart enough to stay away. But yeah, it's a good point. It was just an interesting observation. You're jumping into water. You got no idea what's down there, right? And you get in the water and you go, okay, luckily Fred hasn't landed behind me and squashed me. I'm starting to swim. Who knew what was there? And I don't know. Just something I thought of after the fact. But maybe the producers and they go, we can't have our guys just suddenly being eaten by sharks and whatever. That's just too mean. I don't know. Just a thought.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
very, very good.
It was a good sequence. Out of different movies that have been about prison breaks, this is a good one. It isn't one of those you go, that was a bad prison break. This was definitely a good one.
Yep, love it. Survival ratio is C, life appropriate. Yeah, exactly right. So. Very good. Yeah, so freaking sharks with freaking laser beams. Exactly right. So, and of course, we see our heroes running off into the distance. And of course, from here, you don't know where they're going to get to, but they will survive. And that is the most important thing. So the irony being, of course, Cassian was planning to escape all along. He's gotten away with it. Melshi, who was sort of just going along with the flow, goes with it. Kino, who didn't want to escape, suddenly escaped and then didn't get to escape. And the rest of them probably didn't make it at all. So, yes, not good.
Yeah.
All right. So, and this is actually in slightly backward order, but then back on Coruscant, which I think is kind of cool. And our traffic has returned, which is way up there, which I thought was kind of groovy. And we've got some elevators which move both horizontally and vertically, which I thought was kind of cool. And that's not the last we're going to see some elevators. Lonnie, right? What's this dude up to? Now, I originally thought he was working undercover when I saw this. And you notice the aliens are all starting to appear. So I tend to agree with what you said earlier. Aliens are a bit like persona non grata up at the upper levels with the humans. So they live under the ground. And, yeah, what do you reckon?
Yeah, I thought that too, because it is darker and grimier, and that's where you see the more diverse populace of Coruscant in the obviously many levels below ground.
Indeed. And it just gets further and further. Ads are saying evacuation plans imply that the Empire cares about staff. Well, obviously, they obviously wouldn't live at the prison, as we've discussed. They've got to go somewhere. They can't live, as in all the staff, the guards, and whoever. So you'd think there'd be some kind of transports. And I actually thought in the prison sequence, the guys are going to run out, find all their ships, and fly away. And of course, there were no ships. At the very least, they had to just jump in the drink, and away they went. I did not see that coming at all. So, very good. All right. So this is an interesting sequence of the entire show. All right. We're only seeing one person, and all we're doing is hearing the other. All right. So we're stuck with Lonnie in an elevator. And the first thing I thought of, mate, it is a long, long elevator trip. Really, really long. And I think it's going down the entire time. And, of course, Luthen's voice appears. So Luthen was the contact. Now, I don't know about you, dude, but I did not see us coming a mile away. And, of course, straight away, Lonnie said, mate, I've got a family. And Luthen knows about the family. And I thought, oh, dude, what has this guy been up to?
Well, it's one of those things I really like, the whole dynamics and the whole way all the characters are written in this, because in the Empire and the Imperials and in the Rebellion and the Rebels, there's a lot of grey areas where you've got ones that are more down the line and you've got others that are willing to be in that grey area. And obviously Luthen is one of those people who this is not a game of checkers, it's a game of chess, and he is willing to set the board up and sacrifice people when they need to be, because he is protecting the more important end game. And that's why I think it's a smart show, because you've got to have good writers to be able to write a good mystery sort of story like this. And I've got to say, every single episode has thrown up a curveball where I've gone, I did not see that coming, but it actually makes sense the way the story is playing out. And this is, again, I don't know what will happen to Luthen, but the way I see this, I think he is so committed to the cause. Down the track, he will sacrifice himself just to show that all this, where the Empire are out for themselves for bettering the Empire, I think Luthen is able to see the bigger picture, how things will work to further the rebellion. And I think he would be the type of person who will sacrifice other people, but he wouldn't do anything that he wouldn't do himself. So I could see him doing a big end game where he draws everyone away from Mon Mothma. It goes, it was all me, and I was the one that was behind this, and throws himself under the bus because she is the bigger player and he has to protect her. Something like that. But I did not see this happening.
Yeah, I am completely with you. And it's an interesting sequence because, as we said, all we're seeing is Lonnie in the elevator, just traveling down, 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 down. It's like Coles prices, they're going down, down. And Luthen's just talking in his ear. And it's just a long sequence of poor Lonnie acting by himself in this elevator, right?
Yeah.
We get a nice little bit of previously on Andor, right? We fill in all the audience over the past 9 episodes. Right, the whole thing with Aldani, the whole thing with Ferrix, the Star and the Star Path, Dedra. Luthen now knows who Dedra is. And because I didn't realize until I was watching this sequence that when we started watching the show, Dedra was already there, right? But in reality, Dedra had only been a part of the ISB for a handful of weeks, if I'm not mistaken, or months, right?
Yes.
So she was relatively new. So from Lonnie's perspective, who's been there for 6 years, right? He's been like rolling along quite nicely. His career's been progressing great. Dedra's turned up out of nowhere, and then it's done this whole thing with the star paths, and caused all these ripples. And now, of course, he's having all these problems. Now, of course, Lonnie's, of course, just had his family, he's got his kids and whatever. and things are all starting to change. But I liked how the fact he had to just explain it all in one big load. It's like, this is happening, this is happening, this is happening, this is happening, right? In case you've forgotten, after all, because like it's been 9 weeks since the last time we were here. I thought that was kind of cool. And that was groovy. So he's saying that Dedra is the dog with a bone. She's going out, she's causing all these ripples, all these problems. And I realized afterwards that from Lonnie's perspective, he's being fed all this information from Luthen for whatever reason to improve his career, because up until this point, Rebel Alliance activities have been minimal, aside from just stealing parts from the bases. So Lonnie's probably thinking, mate, just give me a little bit of info here, a little bit of info there. I'll look after you. You look after me. The world is good. And now it's all coming to a head. And of course, he's realized he wants to bail. And of course, that's not going to happen. Now, based on what you said, sorry, you're going to say something? Go for it.
I was going to say, I do like how it's flipped, where you've got the guy that works for the Empire, and he is the one saying, we've got to save these dudes. Here's the Imperial for all intensive purpose with a conscience, and you've got Luthen going, let them die. They can go. That's what I like about this series.
Now, I'm glad you brought that up, because this is interesting, right? So Luthen says there are 50 men, right? He actually says that. And you're right, without even blinking his eyes, he said, no, sacrifice him because, lose Anto Krieger because it's important to keep Lonnie's position secret. But I thought afterwards, who says that they're all blokes? What if you got fathers and sons and mothers and daughters are all part of Anto Krieger's group, right?
Yeah.
And of course, if you saw it from their perspective, right, like we were watching the series and the 50 people who think we're all doing it for the Alliance were fantastic and they all get killed, and we know that that's going to happen, but they don't know. You'd be sitting there thinking, oh, that's not fair at all. That's bullshit. They've been sacrificed, right, to save one guy in the ISB. It's all, remember what I said all those episodes ago, it's all about perspective. Which perspective are you looking at? From this perspective, 50 blokes are going to cark it, right? But we're not seeing it from the 50 people who are going to die, who, as I said, could be males, females, daughters, sons, or whatever. That's rough. And as you're right, Luthen just brushes it off like it's got to be done to keep Lonnie's secret.
This is where my analogy with playing chess works. Those 50 guys are pawns. And you've got the one guy who he's saving might be the bishop, and you're going to find out that Mon Mothma is the queen. And this is a really interesting way in how they're writing this, and it's a very interesting, almost anti-hero, the way that they're playing him. But I do really love the different shades of grey in the characters in this series.
Yeah, and that's it. And that's exactly right. And suddenly Lonnie's like, oh, okay, there's a bit more to you than what we first thought. So I think the elevator scene shows how Luthen was in control of Lonnie and how big this is. Yeah, well, that's exactly right. It probably all started off as like saying Luthen contacts him 6 years ago or thereabouts. Lonnie's in there and they're having drinks at a bar, and he says, well, how about you feed me some info? I'll feed you some info. I'll push your career right up, get you those 3 ranking pips, all right? And he's thinking, like, this is awesome. It's grouse, right? What could possibly go wrong? Yeah, it's all the chickens are coming home to roost. Yeah. Ads has come up. Will Luthen go after Dedra? I thought so when he first mentioned it, right? I thought, is Dedra now in Luthen's crosshairs? He rings up Cinta and says, forget about Cassian, go after Dedra instead. I did think that, I've got to say. So
I think that too. I was thinking that. And do you know who's going to save Dedra from this to advance his career? And we haven't spoken about him or seen in this episode.
Cyril, yeah, you're right.
And I reckon they're going to trap Dedra, and there's no way out, and you might hear a blast or something, and she doesn't die, and it's good old Stalker Khan. I mean, Cyril Khan.
Yeah, good old. That would be very. Oh yeah, absolutely love it. So this, you could argue, puts Luthen, because we haven't seen Anto. I've got to get right. Anto Krieger and his troops, they are expendable from our perspective. If we had seen their story, and maybe we will, right? We go back in time and they're all getting their troops together to go and look after the ship, and you'd be going, oh, that's rough that they're all got to cark it to save Lonnie. Anyway, so we finally get to the end of the elevator trip. Like, it's taken half an hour to get down there. It must be 1,000 kilometers under the surface. And it turns out, yes, Luthen is the dude he was speaking to, and Lonnie was a rebel spy, something we did not know of all those episodes ago. And, of course, Lonnie, after 6 years of having a really good run of it, wants to get out of Luthen's influence, and that is clearly not going to happen. Right? You got no hope, dude. You ain't going anywhere.
Yeah. No, I thought the same thing. I'm like, as soon as he's like, well, maybe this ain't working, too late, son. You're in for good.
Many Bothans died. This is from Return of the Jedi. What if Luthen was responsible? Yeah, well, we're assuming he ain't going to survive this series. And I agree with you. I wouldn't be surprised if he does sacrifice himself to keep Mon hidden. I have to wait and see. But it's a big character moment. It's just two dudes having a conversation, right? And Lonnie doesn't even get out of the elevator. I thought that was interesting. He just stays there, right?
Yeah.
And of course, there's a reference to a vow. Now, remember, a while back, Mon said that she had taken a vow. I don't know what this vow is. A vow to what? Get rid of the Empire, a vow to freedom to the galaxy, or whatever. But yeah, as it's just mentioned, it just confirms that Luthen had been feeding Lonnie information to progress his career. Now, of course, you would think that Luthen had the brains that he's saying, okay, I'm just going to drip feed you all this stuff all those years ago, knowing one day in the distant future something big is going to happen, and they're going to need this guy to help them out.
Yeah.
But Lonnie was just too pushing down the career path to sort of see that, and of course, when all the shit was going on with Aldani and whatever else, you can imagine Lonnie sitting there going, "Oh, I didn't see this coming. This is not what I signed up for." But of course, he can't tell anybody. He's screwed. And of course, he's got a family, the daughter, the whole thing.
Yeah.
Tough.
Yeah. Interesting. You do think Deirdre has put this all together herself without any help. Lonnie could have been given a bone or two just to keep up with her, and then at least they'd have someone on the same level. I guess everything is so you know what I want to say? Everything's so, I guess, kept away from each other. They don't even know what's happening, so they can't do it. It is interesting as an audience sitting back and seeing the whole story, but the characters going through the story don't know what's happening in all these other places that all link together.
Yeah, and because Luthen had recruited Lonnie years ago, right? Because Lonnie was clearly not thinking what was going to happen. It was all pre-planned. As we've seen with Luthen, he's had his fingers in pies everywhere, sacrificed a lot, right? So, aside from the 50 guys who are about to cark it soon, how many others have all died just to keep Lonnie in position, knowing that one day, and as you said, he's going to call upon Lonnie to say, all right, dude, even though Lonnie did the calling in this case, to say, oh, by the way, dude, we kind of need you for something. I agree with you. Lonnie would have an easier time escaping from the mob. Yes, he's definitely backed into a corner, that's for sure. And is considered an investment. I love that terminology, okay? And, of course, you do wonder what Lonnie's going to do now. I think he's screwed. And I think if anybody's going to catch him out, it'll be Dedra, because Dedra's clearly switched on. Yes,
I agree with you. Like, investment is a really good term because it implies that over time they've put time and effort into getting him there. So he's not getting out by walking away from it because they've invested time and money and effort and information from him. So it is a really good description for how they see the people that work for them.
And you sort of covered this off a little bit earlier on, but good old Lonnie asks Luthen what his sacrifice has been. And, of course, good old Luthen lets out this really long speech about he's given up everything. And it was pretty intense stuff. He has to use the tools of his enemies to destroy his enemies. And he just dreams of ghosts and all this sort of stuff. Really intense stuff. And when you hear it from that perspective, the guy has given everything for the cause. And he's alone. He's always alone. And Mon still has a family, as unhappy as it is. We don't really know much about Claire and whatever else. And Vel has got connections with Cinta. But Luthen is just on his own. And you go, you know what? He's just fighting the fight by himself. And now it's starting to ramp up to where it is now. And he's prepared to lose the 50 dudes just to sort of keep Lonnie a secret. It was intense stuff. And it's like even when the elevator shuts, Luthen's still on his own. And I think there's a lot to be said about that. The solitary hero, if you will.
Yeah, he's an interesting character. I don't know how much backstory further than what we've got we'll get of him. Maybe it's better if you don't know, just you know that he's devoted to the cause.
Good point. Adza said, she had him follow. I thought that. I actually thought when he was hiding, crawling through the corridors in the background, Dedra was behind him. I actually did think that would happen, and you never know, that may still happen. Probably didn't, because you think he'd take precautions, but I do wonder where it's all going to go. Now, that's the end of my slides. Christy, can you give me your crimson yawns, please? Don't forget, the more yawns, the worse it was. The less yawns, the better it was. The episode. Dude, One Way Out. How'd you find it?
Just one quick thing I wanted to mention, which I did kind of mention, was Cyril wasn't in this episode. And I have come to the conclusion that going back to George Lucas and the hero's journey, you're getting a couple of hero's journeys in this. And I can see Cyril Khan is getting the big season-long arc, and I do think he starts off on an outpost as a pleb somewhere, and he wants to be in security. I do see just the way things are going. It's got to end with him achieving that and being taken into the Empire, and he finally gets noticed and does something good. So that is what I see coming in the next couple of episodes. I don't know if that's true or not. I did think it was interesting that they didn't mention him, or you didn't see him this episode. Maybe he was hiding, stalking, or whatever, but I thought that was interesting. I did think this was another fantastic episode, probably another 8.5, 9 out of 10 for me again. It's been coasting at a very high level.
Very good. Chrissy's gone the complete opposite. She's gone for the 7 yawns, which is a 3 out of 10. And she made a comment here saying some good parts, but it dragged. Okay,
No.
But as we've pointed out before, it's not Christy's favorite show, and that's fair enough too. I guess it wouldn't be for everybody. So for myself, I watched this on the Wednesday night. I had the headphones on. I was absolutely on the edge of my seat for the entire prison thing. I did not know where things were going to go. Ads, how many episodes? 2. Okay, next week and the week after. And I liked that. I really did. I was on the edge of my seat the whole entire way. What is going on? The whole Mon thing, the ISB thing. The bit with Luthen and Lonnie was a bit long, a bit drawn out. But after watching it again today and having it really sink in, everything meant something. And you know what? I got to say, I gave him the full 10. I've gone for the full load. Wow. It really pushed my buttons the whole way through. And that prison thing was magnificent because I just did not know what was going to happen. And it was excellent. I thought it was an excellent episode. So
well, we could be disappointed, but I'm actually saving a 10 for the finale, because I do think the way this series is going, it could be an absolutely phenomenal last hour of television for a series. So I can't pull that out yet, Dags, but I can understand why you would give it that rating, because I've thoroughly enjoyed everything in this episode.
Well, it's interesting because, when you can watch a show sometimes, and you go, I'm just watching TV, I'm just going through the motions, whatever, on Facebook and here and there, I'm not paying attention. But I was riveted, absolutely riveted to seeing what was going to happen. And honestly, when they were getting ready for that prison breakout, I'm on tenterhooks, right? And even Tracy said this episode had her calling out and causing the partner to ask if she was okay. And it was awesome. I thought, you don't get that from a lot of TV shows, that much tension building up and then going, what is going to happen? Who's going to make it? Who's not going to make it? And the whole thing with Kino not being able to swim, I did not see that coming, right?
Yeah.
It was absolutely spectacular. And then to find out that poor Lonnie's the traitor, is the spy working for the Alliance, is I love it. Unpredictably pushes my buttons, and I really work for it. Even if, as Christy said, some of it did drag, and I guess that's sort of the nature of it, but it's all character driven. That's what works so well. And DJ's gone for the brilliant. So yes, as was mentioned last week, some people are rating this show as the best Star Wars series ever made, but it's not necessarily their favorite. And they are two completely different things. You can have something that you think, I absolutely love it, but it's not the best, or vice versa. You can acknowledge quality, you can acknowledge something that's really ingenious, but you go, I wouldn't watch it every day of the week. I'd turn to Mandalorian or something else, which is fluffier, but more fun to watch. So there's a definitely distinction there, but there are some people whose reviews I've seen, they are rating this as the best in terms of quality Star Wars series that they've seen. And
it's
I think it's really groovy.
It's like you don't watch Schindler's List every Friday night with your friends to have a good time, do you? But it's still a brilliant movie.
That's a very good point, actually.
And this is
all right.
Sorry,
get on.
I was going to say, it doesn't have Jedi, doesn't have aliens, doesn't have space fights, and it's still one of the best Star Wars things they've ever done.
Exactly right. And there's only 2 episodes left. So there you go. So if you haven't done so already, don't forget to be sure to check out our socials on Sci-Fi Zone, both on the Twitters and the Instagrams and all the rest of it. So it's all very, very exciting. And of course, for all the latest and the greatest Andor related things, you got to go to good old Aaron's store, his own version of galactic antiquities and objects of interest. Is that right there, Mr. Aaron?
We do. Do you know how many millions of Andor related things we have at the moment?
0.
Yeah, and for those who are into socials, we've mentioned this on Rip It Off the Card. We'll mention it again here because we have a couple of different people who view. The end of the year, we're having a Sci-Fi Zone get-together at the Matthew Flinders Hotel here in Melbourne. It's, I think, the 17th of December, and
Yep.
everyone's invited if you want to come and hang out. It's just turn up. We're going to get a table. Everyone pays for themselves, and we just hang out as sort of a end of the year Christmas get together. So that's coming up towards the end of December as well.
Yeah, exactly right. And I'll just get rid of that, and I'll just bring up this. There we go. That's absolutely fantastic. So, but you need to let us know if you want to come along, because obviously tickets, seeing will be limited, and of course you got to pay for yourself. So, very cool. Good stuff. There you go, dude. Yes, good stuff. And Colin said by far the best series. Absolutely fantastic. Has it changed people's opinion on the show? Nobody asked for. I haven't spoken to a lot of people, actually. I mean, I think most fans are still working the view. Those who didn't like it still don't like it. Those who were looking forward to it have enjoyed it. I don't know how many people shifted from one side to the other side. I don't really know. I think, it's still dividing the fan community no matter what. And I do know of some people who said, no, it's not their Star Wars. They don't watch it anymore. So
I do know a couple of people who watched the first week and gave up, and then have heard such good things. They've gone back and watched it, and they now enjoy it and think it's good. So
good to see. Good stuff.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're going to buzz off. Thanks for joining us, everybody, on this another wet and cold sort of night. So everybody look after themselves. We'll see them all next week to talk about the second last episode, the penultimate episode. Where are things going to end up is anybody's guess. Mr. Aaron, I'll leave you to it. You party hard, rock on, and we'll see you all next week. Okay. Bye for now.
One way out.